Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, where we discuss all the latest and greatest news in the world of Major League Baseball. My name is Ben Brown. Jeremiah is not in the studio today. With it being the week of Thanksgiving, he is back in his hometown of Fresno, California. So he is not in the studio with me today. I am riding solo on this episode of the Baseball Show. We're going to be talking about our Cy Young Award winners. Last week we did a prediction. They were revealed later that day. Although it is a week ago, I still feel like we have to talk about it here on the show. So we'll reveal the winners, talk about some of their seasons, break down the voting a little bit. After the break, we'll talk about the MVP awards for the American League and the National League. They were revealed last Thursday. Couple of young guys who are really just the budding stars of baseball and really in their respective leagues. So that's a really good, interesting storyline for Major League Baseball, and really a couple of guys that I think can help resurge some of the interest in Major League Baseball. It's obviously one of the major sports, but popular-wise, it's behind football, basketball. You have some other big sports coming up like MMA, soccer, among others. So a couple of these guys can really be the key catalysts into revitalizing baseball. And then we will end the show with the 2017 Hall of Fame ballot being revealed. A couple of new names on this list, obviously, since people have that fifth year of being retired, so now they get eligible for the list. It highlights 34 former players. We'll talk about that list at the end of the show and who some of these names are. So with that being said, we'll get right off into the start of the show. We're talking about the Cy Young Award winners, as I mentioned. We are first off going to start with the American League, and the winner is a guy who has literally never received a Cy Young Award vote prior to this season, and that is Rick Porcello of the Boston Red Sox. A great, great year for Porcello. It's the 7th time a Red Sox pitcher has won this award. The others being Roger Clemens, Jim Lonborn, and Pedro Martinez. Rick Porcello had an absolutely fantastic year. Porcello led the major leagues in wins with 22. He had 4 losses. Our ERA of 3.15, which was not stellar at all, but I think it's really because of his win-loss record that won this award for him. He actually did not receive the most first-place votes. That went to the guy who finished second in the voting, and that was Justin Verlander. Verlander had 14 first-place votes, but it goes by total votes in general. Porcello 137, Justin Verlander 132, and then Corey Kluber of the World Series runner-up Cleveland Indians finishing third with 98 points. As far as the voting goes in the American League, I think it was pretty fair. I thought Porcello would win. Jeremiah and I talked about it last week. I don't necessarily know if Porcello deserved to win, but if you look at the American League side, I guess you can say he did deserve to win. Like I said, the most wins, the least losses with 4, his ERA of 3.15. Look at Verlander, 3.04. I guess the strikeouts are pretty low for Porcello, 189 compared to Verlander, who had 254, and Kluber even with 227. So maybe there's a little bit of a difference in there. But I think Porcello probably deserved to win the award. He had the best year for any American League pitcher in my eyes. He got so much run support, with Boston obviously being the best offensive team in baseball this year. So much run support that his record was really padded because of that. But I guess you can make a case for Verlander. I guess in some instance, you look at his WAR, wins above replacement, which was 6.6, which is definitely the most in the American League. Kluber coming in at second with 6.5. So Porcello only a 5 WAR, wins above replacement. But I really don't take too much consideration into that. I think the wins above replacement award is kind of, I guess, I know the analytics behind it, but I guess it's kind of an up and down award. I guess you can't really take into consideration what one pitcher does compared to someone else who would go in there. Obviously, you have people who go on rolls, people who play extraordinarily well. So I don't really buy too much into that stat, but I guess you have to take it into consideration because when you look at some of these other awards, like the MVP, which I'll do in the second segment, it seems like they take the wins of replacement, the WAR, into consideration because the guy who had the highest in Major League Baseball did win it for the American League side, that being Mike Trout. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But so Rick Porcello, the American League winner, and then you switch over to the National League side, and really this was a big surprise for me. We have Max Scherzer, the pitcher for the Washington Nationals. Scherzer is going to be now one of 6 players to win this award in both the American League, which he won with the Tigers, and now the National League. So he joins some of the company. Look at these names: Roger Clemens, Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Gaylord Perry, and Roy Halladay, people who won the Cy Young in both leagues. So he's joining some pretty good competition and some pretty good names there. Max Scherzer wins this award. I was honestly kind of surprised because you had the 2 Chicago Cubs pitchers of John Lester and Kyle Hendricks. And I feel like they kind of, in a way, maybe took some votes away from each other. But if you look at the awards with the votes, this is what really surprised me. First place votes, Max Scherzer receives 25. Lester gets 1 and Kyle Hendricks gets 2. So by far, Scherzer, people thought he was the winner of this award. He got 25 first place votes. Second highest was second with 2 with Hendricks, and Kershaw also got 2, although I don't think Kershaw really should have gotten that many votes because he missed so much time. But nevertheless, Scherzer, 192 points total. John Lester, 102. And Kyle Hendricks, the ERA champion this year, at 85. I feel like maybe that Lester and Hendricks being on the same team might have taken some votes away from each other. I think voters might have looking at them and kind of taken each other away. But if you look at some of the stats here, so you have Scherzer, 20 wins, 7 losses, so he was the wins leader in the National League, an ERA of 2.96. Look at some of the others. Hendricks, obviously the ERA champ, as I said, 2.13, and then you look at Lester, 2.44. So I am a little surprised there. I think another thing that really helped Scherzer was the strikeout numbers. Most strikeouts in all of baseball last year with 284. Lester only 197, and Hendricks, not many strikeouts, more of a ground ball guy at 170. So I guess you can look at strikeouts, most wins, and ERA. That's still pretty good. I think that's why you go with Scherzer. But personally for me, I would have gone with Lester. I think he had by far a better year. I'm not sure if anyone took into consideration the fact that he simply just can't throw over to first base. That's kind of a really weird thing. I think people might have taken that into consideration. And then you look at Hendricks, a really good pitcher at Wrigley Field and home, but away from home just wasn't the same guy. So maybe people got swayed one way or another. If you look at Hendricks and Lester, they were the 9th set of teammates to play second and third in the balloting, the others being Jack Sanford and Billy Pierce with the Giants in 1962, Joe Niekro and J.R. Richard with the Astros in 1979, Maddox and Denny Neagle with the Braves in 1997, Trevor Hoffman and Kevin Brown with the Padres in 98, Tom Glavine and Maddox again with the Braves in 2000, and then Chris Carpenter and Adam Wainwright with the Cardinals in 2009. Halladay and Cliff Lee with the Phillies in 2011, and then Zach Greinke and Clayton Kershaw last year. So I guess history has sort of been put in stone here that if you have a pair of teammates, they're going to finish second and third because they're going to take votes away from each other. And I think that's exactly what happened, and you have Scherzer winning. And I wouldn't say it's really not deserved. He had a great year, but like I said, I would have gone with Lester. I thought he had just a better year on a better team as well, so I don't know. But anyways, you have Rick Porcello winning the Cy Young for the American League, and then you have Max Scherzer winning it for the National League as a member of the Washington Nationals. With that being said, we'll take our first break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. After the break, we will be talking about the MVP awards for the American League and the National League. The most valuable player, the biggest award in all of each respective sport. We'll break that down and more right after the break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
We are back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. The Minnesota Twins have agreed to a 3-year deal for free agent catcher Jason Castro. This news got broken yesterday. It's about a $24.5 million deal. This was first reported by Fox Sports and confirmed by ESPN. The 29-year-old Castro had spent all of his years with the Houston Astros. Last year, he hit .210 with 11 home runs and 32 RBIs. He appeared in 113 games. He also split time with Evan Gattis, so now he will get his first, basically, full-time starting role with the Twins. When you look at free agency with catchers, it's pretty thin. You only have Wilson Ramos and then Matt Wieters of Baltimore, a couple of names in there. So I guess it's a good thing for Castro. 3 years, $24.5 million, so he's only making about $8 million a year. Not too much. I guess you can look at more of his defensive work. He only hit .210 with 11 home runs and 32 RBIs in 113 games. That's not very good statistically on offense, so I guess you can say it's more of a defensive move. We'll have to wait and see what he can do behind the plate for the Twins, who obviously had a very bad year and are trying to obviously improve on that next year. So with that being said, we'll transition. We are moving into the most valuable player, the MVP awards for the American League and the National League. I will first start with the American League, just as I did with the Cy Young. It's a guy who has now won this award for the second time in the last 3 years. That is Mike Trout, the outfielder for the L.A. Angels, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, however you want to say it. Trout received 19 first-place votes, which was by far more than Mookie Betts with 9, and Altuve actually did not receive any. So you look at total points, Trout with 356, Mookie Betts of Boston with 311, and Jose Altuve with 227. So Mike Trout wins the Gold Glove, the Silver Slugger, and the MVP award. He hit an outstanding .315. He had 29 home runs, 100 RBIs. He had 30 stolen bases. He only got caught 7 times. Scored the most runs in the league. Had the highest WAR at 10.6. I guess you cannot argue with that. He, like I said, is the star of baseball. By far the best player, a 5-tool player. He can hit for contact, hit for power. He can run. He can field. He's got all the intangibles at only 25 years old. He's received an MVP vote every year he's been in the league for all 5 years now. That is absolutely fantastic. 148 out of 148 ballots have had Mike Trout's name on it in one way or the other. As I said, second MVP award in his last 3 years. For me personally, I said this last week, I would have gone with Altuve. I think it's hard because Trout, him being on such a bad team, a last-place team, you don't really see that very often. Obviously, you had Alex Rodriguez win that award on a bad team with the Rangers before. Mookie Betts for Boston was the only player that was on a playoff team, and he did finish second, so maybe you have it there. But I would have gone, personally, like I said, with Altuve. He led the league in hitting with .338, 24 home runs, 96 RBIs, 30 stolen bases, just like Trout, a WAR of 7.7. He added some home runs to his game, which this year, which you'd never see with that magical little second baseman for the Astros. So I guess you can maybe make a claim there. Look at Mookie Betts. He hit .318, which is pretty good as well. 113 RBIs, 31 home runs, 26 stolen bases, so he's not far behind. Also a guy who had a great WAR at 9.6 and had a lot of runs scored with 122. So just one behind Trout, actually, 123. So I guess really all three guys deserving. Trout just walks away with the award. And I think Mike Trout, honestly, is on his way to becoming one of the best players we've ever seen in baseball. He's only 25 years old. He really hasn't even started his prime years of his career yet, and he's already putting up fabulous numbers like this. He's literally a joy to watch every time he steps out on to the field. It just sucks because he's on the West Coast, which doesn't get as much publicity as teams on the East Coast, with it being so late for people on the East Coast out there. And he's just on a bad team. The Angels, a lot of money on that payroll, but they just really can't seem to get it done. Playoffs a couple of years ago, but even then they didn't even win that divisional series. So I guess you could say congrats to Mike Trout, but they got to build a team around him because he is the real deal, and I think he's on his way to becoming, I say, maybe the best of all time. Like, he's that good. Like I said, he can do it all. He can hit for power, he can hit for contact, he can field, he can run the bases, he says the right things, doesn't get into any trouble, which is great for the game because you need people like that, the young stars that people can look up to and emulate and want to become a part of baseball, because they're just not really cutting it right now with baseball. They just don't have any any flair. No one's really excited about baseball right now, and Trout can get them into that, as well as the guy who won the National League Most Valuable Player Award, and that was third baseman from the world champion Chicago Cubs, Kris Bryant. This wasn't even close. He receives 29 first-place votes. Daniel Murphy, who finished second, only fielded one first-place vote. So you have Bryant with 415 total points, Murphy with 245, and then Corey Seager, who is the Rookie of the Year, the shortstop for the Dodgers, 240 points. So he almost actually finished second in the MVP as a rookie, which is absolutely fantastic. But there was no doubt about this one at all. Kris Bryant for the Cubs, not only was he a world champion, he was a Gold Glover. He didn't win the Silver Slugger because Nolan Arenado did, the third baseman from the Rockies. But you can't complain with Bryant winning the MVP. He won the Rookie of the Year last year, so he wins the Rookie of the Year in his first year, and then he wins the MVP that next year right after that. He had 39 home runs, which was just 2 off of the Major League lead, 102 RBIs. He only hit 292, so not as well as some of these other ones, but I think it's the home runs, the RBIs, what he meant to the team. A WAR of 7.7, which was the most in the National League. He also scored 121 runs. He strikes out a lot, 154 times, but still, he had an absolutely fantastic year. Kris Bryant, again, like I said, one of those young guys, just like Trout, who can kind of lead baseball into the promised land and be that guy to look up to. He is the future and the young prodigy for the Chicago Cubs. Look at this. They have Anthony Rizzo. You saw what Kyle Schwarber did in the World Series when he became healthy. If he stays healthy next year, he'll put up absolutely fantastic numbers. You have Bryant to build around, Addison Russell, Javi Baez. We all know about the Cubs. They're, in my opinion, a dynasty just waiting to happen. And we saw that with their first World Series title in over 100 years, finally breaking that 108-year curse. And a lot of it was because of Kris Bryant. He is, like I said, just like Trout, the young star of baseball on the National League side. And it's good that you have these guys on each respective sides of the league, as well as kind of different coasts. You have Trout in LA on the West Coast. Although Illinois is more in like the middle part of the United States, it's more looked at on the east side for Chicago. And you can just build around some of these young guys and have these young kids who start playing baseball emulate people like Bryant and Trout and try and build more interest in your team. Because right now, baseball just doesn't really have it. They're just not really cutting it. But young players like this to build around, Bryant as well as Trout, they can do it. So we'll take our last break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. After the break, we're going to be talking about the 2017 Hall of Fame ballot. It was released just a couple of days ago, breaking down some of the new names on there and all 34 players at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So Major League Baseball owners are reportedly considering a lockout. This is not good news whatsoever. The two sides are trying to negotiate a new CBA, collective bargaining agreement, before the current deal expires on December 1st, so just over a week until we have that CBA expiring. The owners are considering a lockout. This is a move that would end the 21 years in a row that we've had labor peace in baseball. So this lockout would impact a lot of things: roster decisions, free agent signings and trades. But the winter meetings could still go on. That's scheduled to be December 4th through the 8th. But there would not really be the usual frenzy or chaotic situation here in baseball with the winter meetings if this were to happen. So the threat of the lockout comes over Tony Clark. He heads the Players Union, and MLB Commissioner, obviously, Rob Manfred. It's their first time in their current roles. Clark replaced the late Michael Weiner, but Rosenthal noted that Manfred served as the lead negotiator for MLB in the last three CBAs before taking over as commissioner. So, obviously, he has a lot of experience, does Rob Manfred. Hopefully, they can get something done. But this is what happens. We've seen this before in a couple of sports. We saw basketball most recently, just a few years ago, with a lockout, a shortened season, because they just couldn't come to a side agreement. You have the NFL was threatening a lockout for a few years, a couple of years back. And this is what happens. You have the Players Union and the players wanting one thing, which includes a lot of money, guaranteed contracts. Then you have the owners saying, well, I don't really want to do things like that. And they have obviously different opinions, and they have to reach a compromise. And oftentimes that they just don't compromise. So hopefully we do not have a lockout. This would be the first lockout since 1994 if that were to be the case. But 10 days, it doesn't seem like that much, but honestly, when you're negotiating every single day, 10 days is a lot of time. So hopefully the Players Union and the Commissioner Rob Manfred and all of his team can get a deal started, or at least something going on. That way we don't have to worry about a lockout, because really right at the end of the season here, just a few weeks since the World Series ended, you have players needing new homes. You have free agents out there that will not really be able to work out with their new teams. So it's something that we don't want and we need to work on. And hopefully a deal, like I said, will get done. And we won't have to worry about the threat of a lockout, because baseball's offseason is really, really short. We're just at the end of November here. Then we have just a couple of months off before players start reporting to spring training in the beginning of February. So there's not much time off between there, not much time for you to sort of get an understanding going where you can get a deal in place. So have to wait and see what happens, man. But I'm really hopeful. I think something will get done. These lockouts and stuff don't happen very often. No, it's not something that the players want, nor is it something that the owners want. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I do believe something will get done. So now we'll transition over to the last part of the show here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We will be talking about the new Hall of Fame ballot for 2017. It was released on Monday, a couple days ago, as I mentioned. This is from the Baseball Writers Association of America, so the BBWAA. So there's some players on this list, including people like Jeff Bagwell, Trevor Hoffman, Tim Raines. A couple of new ones are Vladimir Guerrero. He had a great year with the Expos and the Angels. Manny Ramirez. Think about all the years he had with Boston, Cleveland, at the later part of his career out in L.A. with the Dodgers. Pudge, Ivan Rodriguez, as well as Yankee, I guess you can say a legend, because they have so many great players, but if not a legend, a really good player for the Yankees in this part of the decade with catcher Jorge Posada. So like I said, they list some of the 34 former players on this list. So people like Bagwell, Hoffman, and Raines each obtained at least 67.3% of the vote last year. Although you do need 75% of the vote to get in. That's something that Ken Griffey Jr. and Mike Piazza did do last year. Those three are still in a pretty good situation. So every player who has ever cleared the 65% threshold in any of these elections has eventually gone into the Hall of Fame, except for Jack Morris, who took away his eligibility in 2015, and he won't be eligible again until next year. So they're sitting at 67.3 at least. You need to get to 75. It seems like every year you have another year to think about some of the careers that some of these guys had and look at their stats more, and you think to yourself, well, I didn't really vote for him last year, but now when I look at the stats, that's someone who I think can actually get in. So, and like I said, all but one guy who's at least gotten to 67.3% has got to that 75%, barrier there and gone into the Hall of Fame. So when you look at Bagwell, Trevor Hoffman, Tim Raines, they all look like pretty good locks to get into the Hall of Fame. If not this year, maybe the year after. We'll have to wait and see. Bagwell was the 94 MVP, and he finished with 297 average, 449 home runs. Hoffman with 601 career saves. Tim Raines led the National League in steals 4 times and is 5th all-time in stolen bases with 808. So I think they look like pretty good locks to get in eventually. You look at some of the new names on here. Vladimir Guerrero, he finished hitting .318, 449 home runs, and just 4 RBI short of 1,500. I think Vlad is an absolute lock to get into the Hall of Fame. He finished with a .318 average. That is absolutely fantastic. Bagwell and he have the exact same amount of home runs. Also, the arm that Vladimir Guerrero had in the outfield, he would just literally throw out people left and right. I mean, seriously, that guy had a cannon out there in outfield. I think he's a lock to get in. You look at Ramirez, I guess you can maybe say steroids a little bit. He was sort of questioned at some point, although not so much as some of these other guys, but his stats, he hit .312, 555 home runs, 1,831 RBIs. And you look at some of his postseason stats, this is what kind of sticks out to me. 29 home runs, 78 RBIs in 111 postseason games. He was literally just a guy you need to worry about at all times, especially in the postseason when he did with Boston for all those great years. He was a serious threat. Like I said, the steroids did test positive a couple of times, so that is the one thing you got to kind of worry about. But when you look with Manny Ramirez, he's not really as highly prolific as some of these other steroid guys like Sosa, Bonds, Roger Clemens, Rafael Palmeiro, among others. So we'll have to wait and see. You look at some of the catchers, Pudge Rodriguez and Jorge Posada. I think they're kind of tweeners. They might be on the fence a little bit. I think the successful careers they had for such a long time and what they were able to do behind the plate with some of their defensive work will definitely help them. I guess with Pudge Rodriguez, he hit 311 home runs for his career, hit 296. So that's not too bad when you look at some of his offensive stats. But nevertheless, we'll have to wait and see. The vote will be, I don't know, maybe next summer, sometime in the summer. So we have a while to go until we really crank down and see what's going to happen. But this was the list of the 34 different names. Like I said, a couple of newcomers, some guys who I think they're going to get in there that have been on ballots in the previous years, and we'll have to wait and see. It's always a great thing to get into Cooperstown. Is a great sort of recognition for your career. Talks about everything you've done, and now I'd say with really for the last few years and beyond, now you're kind of transitioning out of the steroid era. So you're going to see guys get into the Hall of Fame that honestly really, really deserve it and that did it the clean way. You're not going to have to worry about any of these guys who literally just use steroids to sort of pad their stats and get an advantage among others. You're going to see guys who did it the clean way, and that's what's important to me, and that's what I think is honestly a really good thing for the sport, for baseball, and for the Hall of Fame. With that being said, guys, we will end our show today. A nice nice, solid show here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. Like I said, Jeremiah is not here because of Thanksgiving. He is back in his hometown of Fresno, California, visiting some family, so it's always great. But for Jeremiah, my name is Ben Brown. We would like to thank you for listening at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving if you're listening here in the States, and if it's celebrated where you are, hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Spend time with your family and friends and loved ones, and just really be safe if you're doing any Black Friday shopping. It gets pretty hectic out there, so make sure you're safe and don't do anything too crazy and chaotic, because you wouldn't want to do anything stupid like that so close to the holidays and miss out on some of those holidays themselves. So with that being said, guys, like I said, we'll end the show. My name is Ben Brown. I'd like to thank you for listening. Have a good Thanksgiving. Jeremiah will be back next week, so he and I will be in the studio, and we'll see you then. Have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.